Unit 12, Part 6. So when we did the symbolization of I and O, we had an existential quantifier, right? So the logical form was there exists an X such that X is both Australian and a surfer, right? And there exists an X such that that one X is both Australian and not a surfer. Now the use of that existential quantifier is, right, remember these quantifiers range over the entire universe, right? So there exists an X, there is one amongst all of the things that are. Amongst all of the things that are, that is both this and that, where you've got the existential quantifier with conjunction. Now, in the A and the E, so start with the A, which is the easy one, right? All Australians are surfers, the universal inclusion. But in both of these, we're going to be using the universal quantifier. Okay, the thing we're going to try and understand is why it is that the universal quantifier is going to go with the hook, right? This is going to be the form of the A, with the negation is going to be the form of the E, right? These ones are the existential, that was I, the negation here, that was O. Why must the universal go with the hook? Well, the universal quantifier says, for every being in the universe, this propositional function is true, okay? So we're asking the question, what is the logical form of the A and the E categorical? Right, what's the logical form of the sentence, all Australians are surfers? What's the logical form of no Australians are surfers, right? So we're going to start with the universal quantifier, but remember, what is a quantifier? And we're going to have quantifier statements, as all of these are all quantifier sentences or quantifier statements, right? They start with the quantifier, the scope of the quantifier goes to the end of the sentence. These are all formulas in quantifier form. None of them are conjunctions, none of them are conditionals, because they are in quantifier form. As I stressed, form is one or the other. So in a quantifier statement, what is a quantifier statement? It's a statement that tells you of how many things the propositional function is true. An existential quantifier lets you know that the propositional function is true of at least one thing. A universal quantifier tells you that the propositional function is true of everything in the universe. Okay, so what should our propositional function be for these categoricals, right? It's a tough question because all Australians are surfers, right? And I'm going to start that with the universal quantifier. So I'm going to say for every X in the universe, but I'm not talking about this pencil or this piece of chalk, right? I'm only talking about Australians. How do we use the universal quantifier where that does in fact range over the entire universe and is saying this propositional function is true of everything in the universe, and yet limit my assertion to the subject class, right? All Australians are surfers. I really want to say that all of the ones in this class are surfers. Okay, the answer is just with the use of the hook, right? With the use of the conditional. Because what are the truth conditions for the conditional, right? Remember that a conditional is true when the antecedent is false, right? Or when the consequent is true, right? What does a conditional tell you? It tells you that a conditional is, so here are the important facts. A conditional is true whenever the antecedent is true. Sorry, a conditional is true whenever the antecedent is false. That's important for grasping why you're gonna pound these things into your head, why the universal for categorical form is going to go with a hook always, right? Why? Because when the antecedent of a conditional is false, the conditional itself is true. That's going to help in making the propositional function or this quantifier statement also true of all the things that are not Australians, like this piece of chalk. This piece of chalk is not an Australian, right? So what I'm going to have as the logical form of all Australians are surfers is this, right? For all x, if x is Australian, x is a surfer, it's true of this piece of chalk because this piece of chalk is not Australian, thus the antecedent of the propositional function is true. So for all things, I'm correct in saying for everything in the universe, this propositional function is true, right? Because for all the things that are not Australian, the antecedent is false, and therefore the propositional function is true. So I am indeed correctly asserting something true of all the things in the universe with the use of this propositional function. See how it holds of all the things that are not Australian. Well, what am I saying? What's the positive content of my categorical, all Australians are surfers? I'm saying that if you're Australian, you're a surfer, right? I'm saying that all the Australians are surfers, right? The positive content of my, so there's two things I said. The first thing I was trying to explain was, right, how, right, I'm using the universal quantifier, so it has the propositional function has to be true of all the things in the universe. How is the propositional function going to be true of all the things that are not Australian, which I sort of don't want to talk about, which I'm sort of not saying anything about when I'm saying all Australians are surfers. Well, for all the things that aren't Australian, antecedent is false, so the propositional function is true. Voila, the fact that the propositional function is true sort of solves that problem. Allows me to be ranging over all the things in the universe, including the things that are not Australian, and asserting a propositional function is true. That is true. Right. Okay, so the next part was, what is the positive content of my categorical, all Australians are surfers? What am I saying? I'm saying that if the antecedent is true, if you are in fact an Australian, then you're a surfer, right? Our Venn diagram was, right, this section is empty. All the things that are in the class, the section of things that are Australian but are not surfers is empty, right? Remember, the shading indicates non-existence. Shading indicates that this section is empty, right? All Australians are surfers means there's nothing in the class, there's nothing in this section of things which is Australian and not a surfer. If there are any Australians, they are also included amongst the surfers. That's what all Australians are surfers means. It means if there are any Australians, they're included within this class, the class of surfers. All Australians are surfers. Right, so my positive content is captured, right? So I'm using the universal quantifier, which ranges over the entire universe of things, but I'm managing to limit my positive assertion, as it were, to the class of Australians with the use of the hook